Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City of Perth Library. My name is Kate Kasakis, and I'm the CEO of the RPH, the Royal Perth Hospital Research Foundation. I'm delighted to welcome you all here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we are standing on and the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We celebrate the continuing traditions, living culture and spiritual connection to Burraloo and the Dergal Yerrigan. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. Just before we start, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping points. In the event of a fire or emergency, please remain calm and listen to the instructions of library staff. Refrain from using the lifts, and if required, exit the building in a safe but quick manner. On this level, the evacuation map is located both outside and inside the auditorium, and the emergency evacuation point is located outside the library on the lawn area in that direction. If you need to use the bathroom during the event, toilets are located to the right or to your left when exiting the auditorium. Finally, could you please ensure that your mobile phones are turned to silent, and note that this is a non-smoking venue. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing our speaker, Dr. Mark Sim, a leading figure in musculoskeletal and healthy aging research and an RPH Research Foundation Career Advancement Fellow. Mark is a Senior Research Fellow at Edith Cowan University and leads the Falls Free Future program within the Nutrition and Health Innovation Research Institute. He is the coordinating principal investigator for the Perth longitudinal study of aging women. Mark's research program examines the role of nutrition, physical activity and its impact on disease progression, more specifically musculoskeletal function and structure. His research is based at Royal Perth Hospital and has been supported by both the Foundation and the WA Government's Future Health Research and Innovation Fund. He holds a PhD from UWA, is a Level 2 exercise and sports scientist, and a registered nutritionist. He brings both academic rigour and real-world experience, including time as a sports physiologist at the Western Australian Institute of Sport. And Mark has kindly agreed to take questions after his presentation, so please save your questions until then. Would you now please join me in welcoming Dr. Sim to the stage to present today's topic, preventing falls with food and fitness, specific to the aging.
Thank you. Hello. Good afternoon, good morning everybody. Thank you for making the trip out on this cold and wet and now kind of sunny, not sunny day. It's a real pleasure to share some of the work that I've done over the last 7 or 8 years at the Royal Perth Hospital. The main focus of this talk really is around nutrition. I'll talk a little bit on exercise, but I think there's quite a lot of resources currently available for exercise, which we can share later on. That's not a problem. But really, I guess the information about nutrition is a little bit more sparse. So I think that's probably the most interesting bit. To kind of give you a background in terms of why I do what I do, falls really have a massive or devastating effect on our population. This quote was basically said by somebody who just had a fall. And we look at it like, I'm finished, completely finished. The most important thing is to stay on my feet. People, whenever we think of aging and we think of disease, heart disease, cancer always comes to mind. But the one thing that people always tell me as part of the work that I do in the community is when I lose my independence, that I really struggle with that. So falls are one of the major causes in terms of a loss of independence. So what we do know is that 1 in 3 Australians will fall each year. Every 5 minutes an Australian will be hospitalised due to a fall. We spend a lot of money and days on falls in Australia. And the problem with falls is they lead to fractures. And when we have fractures, that trauma, that experience of having a fall leading to another fall is something that holds people back. And when I say hold people back, it means if we've had a fall and we get told we need to exercise. We're scared to exercise because we're scared to fall again. So it creates this vicious cycle which then impairs our mobility, our confidence. Because we don't want to go out, it leads to depression and isolation. So really trying to tackle the problem early on is one of the best things that we can do. So the reason why falls are really interesting in my opinion is that despite all the research, all the drugs, we don't have any specific miracle pill that prevents falls. There's no pharmaceutical intervention that can prevent falls. Some of them can help with preventing fractures, but not falls. Now, what we do know is that 1 in 2 fractures will be caused by falls, especially hip fractures. So really, if we prevent the fall, we're more likely to prevent the fracture. Now, in terms of exercise, the evidence is really, really strong. If we undertake exercise, that is one of the best ways to reduce our risk of falls. Now, what kind of exercise? The exercises that people generally like to do is walking. However, walking is one of the exercises that actually is shown not to reduce the risk of falls. In fact, we really need to do balance exercises. Some examples of balance exercises might be like Tai Chi, yoga, some like Pilates, and resistance exercise. What I mean by resistance exercise, try and get rid of the image of somebody in a gym with very, very heavy weights trying to lift a bar. Like, that's completely irrelevant. What we're talking about is functional exercise. So resistance exercise might be something as simple as you telling yourself every time I'm watching telly, there's an advert, I'm going to challenge myself and I'm just going to stand up really, really slowly. I'm going to stand up as quickly as I can, but lower myself as slowly as I can and back up. Those are resistance exercises that we can do, that we can incorporate as part of lifestyle to try and improve our muscle strength and the strength of our bones as well. That's just one exercise. Another simple exercise might be when you might be standing behind a kitchen table, for example, you have one leg just slightly off the ground, right? And you're trying to do some light balance while you're doing a task. That task requiring you to think about something while balancing is one of the best ways that we can train our body to react more quickly in the event that we get a trip. So think of things that you can do around the house that really help. For example, one of the things that I have my mom doing at the moment is every time she might go to the supermarket and she comes back, before she puts the one bag away, she does this 5 times with the bags, right? So we're training our arms. She might be doing 5 of them, she might be doing 5 of that. But these are really simple things, the resistance exercise that you don't have to go to a gym to do. As long as we build it as part of our lives, the benefit will be there. In fact, the more we build these activities into our lives, the more likely we are to do it and the more likely it is to be beneficial, because there's a very good transference from what you need to do in your day-to-day living. So I can answer more questions on the exercise bit later on, because I really want to jump into the nutrition. And the reason I speak about nutrition is because exercise, in my opinion, is a very big piece of the puzzle, but it's only one piece. And the other bit is our diet. In terms of muscle, bone, and musculoskeletal health and falls prevention, we typically get thrown with things, we typically get advised to make sure our protein consumption is high, our vitamin D and our calcium levels are high, our intakes are high. But hopefully today I can convince you there's a lot more to diet than just these 3 things when we're talking about musculoskeletal health. Don't get me wrong, these things are really important, but there's a lot more. The good thing is we live in Western Australia, and theoretically we should have some of the highest vitamin D levels in the world, especially compared to the eastern states, but it really depends on season, and a day like this, probably not too much. But we get it from the sun. So our sun exposure, which I'll speak on slightly later on, is quite important as well. So this is what the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating looks like. We have a wheel with 5 different food groups. You've got your grain, you've got your vegetables, fruit, your dairy, and your meats, your lean meats and poultry proteins. Now these 2 are typically what we see a lot in terms of musculoskeletal health. Today we're going to chat a little bit about this particular food group here. Now, what is really interesting about vegetables is that we don't typically associate vegetables with musculoskeletal health, but hopefully I can convince you it's a little bit different. What we do know is that less than 1 in 10 Australians actually consume the recommended amount of vegetables a day, which is 5 serves. 1 serve is about 75 grams or 3/4 of a cup. And most people do consume the recommended amount of, half of Australians consume the recommended amount of fruits a day as well. So this is a really, really nice study done by some of our colleagues in Melbourne. Probably the biggest nutrition study in musculoskeletal health over the last, last 10 to 20 years. It's an amazing study because essentially what they did in a very simplistic way was they went out to over 20 aged care facilities across Melbourne. And all they did was that they provided the recommended amount of dairy and to provide calcium and protein to bring all these aged care residents from where they were to the recommended levels, right? Purely food, cheese, yogurt, milk. And what they found was that this is in 8,000 people, just over 7,000 people over a 2-year period. What they found was that in as little as 5 months, they were able to reduce the amount of fractures by 1/3. They were able to reduce the amount of hip fractures by 46% and falls by 11%. Okay? So clearly nutrition has a very, very strong role in musculoskeletal health. Now, I will point out in this trial, they weren't supplementing to get people way beyond the recommended daily intake. They were just supplementing to get people to the recommended intake, right? So there's a big difference. So all those supplements, all those things that you might see, maybe there might be a place for it, but in general, we can actually use food to get us to our recommended daily intakes to tick all boxes. Now, so what they were basically doing was providing 4 serves of dairy to provide calcium and 2 to 2.5 serves of protein a day. And I'll cover protein on the next slide. But what does a serve of dairy actually look like? 1 cup of low-fat milk, 2 slices of cheese, 3/4 cup of yogurt, or 1 cup of soy milk. It is, for some people, it is quite challenging to actually consume the recommended amount of dairy in a day of 4 serves. So there are alternatives, and that's where probably an individual consult with a dietitian or a nutritionist would come in very handy, because it's one thing to say that we should be eating 4 serves a day. Not everybody can, and if you have any food intolerances and stuff like that, a specialist will be able to help you figure out what the best way to get your total intake might be. Now, in terms of protein, so what does 2 to 2.5 serves of protein a day look like? So a standard serve might be 65 grams of meat. It is actually much smaller than most people think. It is probably a little bit smaller than the palm of your hand here. 80 grams of for example, a salmon, a can of tuna, 2 large eggs, or bacon. That's probably not the best way to get protein, but to give you an indication of how much more protein you get from animal versus plant-based foods, that provide some context. But you can see quite clearly that protein is essential, especially as we age. Because as we age, our bodies become less efficient at actually using the protein. So we need to get more protein in our diet in order to kind of counteract the declines in muscle building by the body. So moving on to vegetables. So what do we know about vegetables? When we think about vegetables, the first thing that generally comes to mind is heart health. I think the message has been pushed out for many, many years that vegetables are very, very good for your heart. What we're also finding is that it is also highly beneficial when we're talking about your muscles and your bones. What we've shown over the last couple of years, which I'll show in the next couple of slides, is that a higher vegetable consumption is associated with better muscle strength, better function, so movement, and lower incidence of disability. And these are really, really critical because these 3 things contribute to your fall and fracture risk. The other thing that that vegetables are good for. Obviously, if it's beneficial for your heart, if it's beneficial for your brain health, those things also regulate and play a massive role in your muscle and bone health. So by targeting all systems at one go, you're more likely to get the benefits from these foods. So what does a serve of vegetables actually look like? You've got, for example, half cup of frozen veggies, you've got 1 cup of green leafies, and you've got some tinned vegetables here. I will say frozen veggies are actually a really good option for getting your nutrients because they actually they're not compromised in their nutritional content compared to fresh veggies, especially if they're snap frozen. So if we don't have time to go out to the markets to get vegetables, our frozen veggies are a very, very good option. In terms of how you might cook the vegetables, the one thing I would say is never ever boil. If you boil your vegetables and you start seeing your water turn to the color of those vegetables, you are losing everything good in those vegetables. So use that water. If you have to boil the vegetable, use that water to create the soup. Use the water to create to boil your rice, to cook other foods, because then at least you're putting some of the nutrients back into the food that you're consuming. Things that you can do, steaming, microwaving, those things really help retain the nutritional profile of these vegetables as well. Now this is it's quite a complex slide, but what I just wanted to highlight here is that when we talk about vegetables, we can actually break them up into to 5 main categories. You've got your allium vegetables, onion, garlic, and leek. You've got your cruciferous vegetables, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, your leafy greens, yellow, orange, red, and your legumes. And the reason I've put this up here is because although we tend to classify vegetables as the same, they actually provide different vitamins and nutrients. So the old saying that my grandma used to tell me, have 3 colors on your plate at every meal, it actually is scientifically validated. All right, there is a difference between different types of vegetables. Really, really important to try and get as much diversity as we can. So, as Kate was mentioning, I was really fortunate to run this very large study, which I'm going to show a lot of results from over the last 20 years. This study has been running. It's called the Perth Longitudinal Study of Aging Women, which was started in 1998 by Professor Richard Prince. This study basically followed a group of 1,500 women from Western Australia over the next 20 years. We collected their bone measures, their cardiovascular measures, their dietary data consistently over that period, and here I'm presenting some of the results from that work. So it's a huge body of work. Although I'm presenting it, there's a lot of people that have contributed to the success of this quite large cohort. Now, in one of our very first studies that we did in 2017, what we found was that when we compared women who were consuming 3 serves, bearing in mind 5 serves is what the recommended daily intakes are, to women who were consuming less than 2 serves, so way under the recommendations, what we found was that these individuals were more likely to present with weakness and they were more likely to move slowly. They also had about a 26% greater risk for a fall that resulted in hospitalization. All right, so it kind of made me go, that's quite interesting, but how? How does that work? And then we started to break down the vegetables into the types that I showed on the previous slide. And what we found was that the cruciferous vegetables, your broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts, for example, and your allium vegetables, your garlic, onion, and leek, those vegetables were particularly strongly associated with this relationship, right? And you know, those amounts, that's like half a cup of broccoli. That's basically one to 2, a little bit of onion and maybe a clove of garlic a day. So it's not about the one-off, it's about the consistent pattern of having these nutrients every single day. So if we think about a vitamin that you might take, say for example, a medication, taking the medication once off is not going to do any benefit. It has to be done consistently over a long period of time. So we dug a little bit deeper, and one of the things that I kind of that kind of drew my attention was nitrate is actually one of the compounds that's provided a lot in vegetables. And I started to dig, and I found that nitrate was associated with cardiovascular health, and that was one of the things that contributes to musculoskeletal health. It was associated with body composition, musculoskeletal health, cognition, blood flow to the brain, again, can affect musculoskeletal health. But more interesting for me was that it was actually used by professional athletes to try and improve performance. So I said, what if we didn't have those huge doses, but we had a consistent small dose from vegetables every single day? What does that mean for us? And so we ran the study in the Perth women's cohort, and we looked at women with the highest nitrate intake versus women with the lowest nitrate intake. And when we looked at the relationship, what we found was that women with the highest intake had about 35% lower chance of being weak, to display weakness in their upper body, and 28% lower risk for being slow in movements. Now, these weakness and slow cut points that we use, slow, yes, no, weak, yes, no, were based on a cut point that we know increases somebody's risk for falls. The other thing that was really interesting was the slow time up and go actually meant that an individual who could not complete this task would not be able to get across a road when the traffic light goes beep, 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 beep. So these are clinically important thresholds. Okay. And what does that mean? Basically, when we look at the highest versus the lowest group, we're talking about half a serve a day versus somebody who has between 1 to 2.5 serves a day of vegetables. So we're just talking about 1 to 2 cups of vegetables a day versus somebody who doesn't have any or has maybe less than half a cup. So if we make those small changes, consistent changes, there is the potential to improve our muscle function. Now, one of the criticisms that we got in that study was that it was really only women, upper body strength is not really the best predictor for falls. What happens if you look at it over a much longer period of time in men and women, and what about lower body strength? So we ran this same study across the lifespan now. This time just over 3,000 Australians in the eastern states. And we followed them over a 12-year period. Right? So we looked at their dietary intake over a 12-year period. And we measured their strength at the 12-year mark. And what we still saw was that when we looked at the whole group, these individuals with the highest nitrate intake that were consistent with what we saw with what I presented on the previous slide were stronger, and they were a little bit faster as well. They were less likely to be weak, and they were less likely to be slow. And this whole relationship was not affected by sex or physical activity status. Now, I want to talk about physical activity status here because the message can get misinterpreted. I'm not saying that if you consume these vegetables and you don't exercise, you'll be fine. What I'm saying is that even in people who didn't exercise, consuming these vegetables were beneficial. And that was very, very interesting for me because from my perspective, if somebody has just come out of surgery and they cannot do any exercise, can we be giving them a diet rich in these foods to try and prevent the decline in muscle function over time? And that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to think of ways that we can adapt our nutrition into effective solutions, which I'll speak a little bit on later. The other thing that is in green leafy vegetables that has really caught my eye, and cruciferous vegetables as well, is vitamin K. When we think about vitamin K, every single baby in Western Australia gets a little shot of vitamin K in their bum, and that helps with the coagulation of blood. So if you get a cut and you're vitamin K deficient, you will bleed out. Previously, vitamin K was only thought to be related to helping blood clot. But now there's a lot of evidence to suggest that vitamin K may play a role in muscle and bone health. So we ran this really simple study. I mean, I say simple, but it was hard to do. We gave people 4 weeks of a diet rich in vitamin K vegetables. Then they stopped for 2 weeks. Then they had a diet in low vitamin K rich vegetables for 4 weeks, stopped for 2 weeks, and then they had a control, which was basically just orange and sugar. And by providing approximately 3 additional vegetables rich in vitamin K a day, what we found is by the end of that 4-week period, they actually had much better markers of bone metabolism, suggesting that there was better turnover. The bone health markers were improving. They also had better vitamin K status. So by simply using diet in as little as 4 weeks, we were able to improve some of these markers of bone turnover. That was quite interesting for me, but I was like, what does that mean for our women in for this cohort from Western Australia? So now we went back to our samples and we actually measured vitamin K status in these women. And what we found was that compared to women who had the poorest vitamin K status, those who had better vitamin K status had up to 40% lower risk of a fall-related hospitalization as well. These women also had the women with better vitamin K, the women with poorer vitamin K status were also slower. They also had a greater decline over a 5-year period in their 6-meter walk test. So for example, sitting on a chair, standing up, walking 3 meters around the cone, coming back and sitting down. All right? So some evidence again suggesting the importance of vitamin K in musculoskeletal health. When we looked this time, so that was circulating vitamin K levels in your body. Now I'm presenting some data on the amount that was consumed. Okay, so slightly different. When we looked at vitamin K, 100 micrograms per day, lower risk of falls and hip fractures. All you really need to get 100 micrograms per day was 1.5 serves of green leafy vegetables. Right? So that's really all we needed to get to those levels. I'm not saying that if you consume more vitamin K, you will not fall or fracture, but people who tend to have a higher intake tend to fall and fracture a lot less. And this is another study that kind of links everything together. Vitamin K is one of those things where it's come from the cardiovascular field and then it's kind of moved into the musculoskeletal field. And this study which we did this year actually looked at vitamin K and heart and blood vessel health. So this time we took an ultrasound and we looked at the amount of calcification that they had in somebody's neck, so just up here. And what we found was that in individuals with the highest vitamin K intake, they had less calcification on the arteries here. And we think, and not only did they have less calcification, they also had lower risk for a cardiovascular event over the next 15 years, and less likely to die from heart disease as well. Now, the reason I'm showing this is because when we think about our muscles, essentially our blood vessels are our expressways, all right? And our cars are our blood, it's blood. And if our expressway is clogged up or the roads are damaged, you know that the muscle and bone is going to be compromised because we're not getting the nutrients, we're not getting the removal of waste. So heart health plays a massive role in musculoskeletal health as well. So this is why I think we're seeing some of these benefits with vitamin K and nitrates as well. So to kind of give an overview, we've spoken a little bit on the cruciferous vegetables, the allium vegetables, how they have been associated with lower risks of falls and how they might contribute to better muscle strength through things such as nitrate and vitamin K. Talked a little bit about vegetable diversity and why it's important to have 3 colors on your plate. How it has the potential to improve strength and function, markers of bone metabolism. And when you combine all these things together, in addition with heart health, cognitive health, maybe that possibly explains these relationships that we're seeing with lower falls and fracture risk. In terms of sun exposure, we really only need a few minutes a day in Western Australia, especially in summer. but it is critical that we think about the clothing that we're wearing, because if we have too much of our skin covered, we actually don't get the correct amount of vitamin D production. So there are new guidelines by the Cancer Council of Australia and the Bone Health Foundation, which now provide you with safe sun exposure in Western Australia by time of the year and skin color. Because if you're fairer, you might need a lot less sun exposure than somebody who's a lot darker. And I think that's a very important point, because there's no one-fits-all strategy when it comes to nutrition and lifestyle. Just to kind of give you a rough idea of what a food pyramid should look like, you've got a lot of fruits and vegetables at the bottom here. You've got grain, you've got your lean meats and protein, and you've got your healthy fats right up here. Some of the key things that we also know are essential for musculoskeletal health: high fluid consumption, limiting your alcohol intake. However, I will say a glass of red wine a couple of times a week is not actually a bad thing, because good red wine can actually benefit heart health, brain health, and there's some emerging data that suggests it benefits musculoskeletal health as well. The things that we should stay away from in alcohol is your hard liquors and beer, right? Those are the things that, that generally don't do any benefit at all. Now, what I've also done, if for those of you who have a smartphone, if not, we can always get the foundation to email this out to everybody. If you have a smartphone, you can scan this QR code. If not, we'll send it out. But I've put together a recipe cookbook of 9 recipes based on feedback that I've received from the community in the past. It's basically foods that will have the amount of vegetables, protein, calcium that you can prepare in less than 20 minutes a meal. It's also got some quite fun foods like an ice cream that actually has vegetables in the ice cream. It doesn't sound attractive at all, but it's been really popular with grandchildren. So when somebody prepares it for an entire family, that works really, really well. It's really well. I will kind of finish off on what we are doing at the moment. Is the next step in this journey is people have said, well, we know we need to eat the correct number of vegetables, we know we need to do this, but I really struggle with doing it. Can you give me a food that does all this for me? But I don't want it to be a powder. I don't want it to be a soup. And they were very clear that they didn't want it to be a soup or a powder. So what we're doing now is, I've just been funded by the Bone Health Foundation of Australia, and we are creating a bone-specific ice cream. So the ice cream, 1 scoop of ice cream will provide about 2 serves of vegetables. It will provide 1 to 1.5 serve of fruit, about 20 grams of protein, and vitamin D. And hopefully that can be used to boost people's intake, especially across the summer months, from 3 serves to 5 serves of vegetables a day. It is the ice cream sounds simple, but it's actually quite a complex process, because we've got to take the ice cream, we've got to take the vegetable, we've got to take out all the water from the vegetable using liquid nitrogen, we've got to freeze dry the vegetables, and then create a powder from these vegetables, incorporate it into an ice cream, get rid of the vegetable aftertaste from the ice cream using fruits, and then put more ingredients there to make sure it doesn't have too much sugar as well. So on paper, it sounds quite simple. We've just formulated our first 2 flavors, chocolate and blueberry, which tick all boxes, and we are about to take the ice cream to trial as well. So hopefully this Bone Boost Gelato will provide an alternative, a fun alternative that could be used, especially during the summer months, to improve musculoskeletal health. And I'd just like to acknowledge our team and the support that I've received from my funders, the WA government, and the Royal Perth Hospital Research Foundation. Thank you.
What about chocolate?
What chocolate? What kind of? The best kind of chocolate? Dark, 90 plus, 80+%. the dark chocolate. So dark chocolate has actually a lot of the beneficial compounds that you get from red wine. So they call them polyphenols or flavonoids. Those things we've shown there's a large body of evidence showing that dark chocolate in small quantities can actually benefit heart health and brain health as well. So it is not the Cadbury chocolate that we get, that's a no-go. Essentially the more bitter the chocolate, the more good stuff it probably has.
So even if it's got 70% or 80% from Cadbury's, I think there's one like it 70%, that's no good?
It depends on the sugar content as well. The sugar content, because what happens with chocolate is the minute you consume the chocolate, if it's very sweet, you get that spike in blood sugar levels, and that spike in blood sugar levels we know has a detrimental effect on bone as well. So, and muscle. So it's really important to try and balance. What I want to hammer home is that I'm not saying you should not eat chocolate. I think you should eat chocolate, right? Because what's life without a bit of fun, right? But what I'm saying is the quantity that we consume the chocolate is critical. I'm not saying don't eat ice cream. Go and eat ice cream, because if it makes you happy, do it. But bring it back. And if I was going to have a big scoop of ice cream, can I go half a scoop, but then maybe increase my milk intake, right? Those are the kind of concessions that I call them realistic concessions, because even myself, I would not be able to follow the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating every single day. It is impossible for me. So I look at concessions in my diet where I can make 5% here, 10% there, and then hopefully over a course of 6 to 7 months, I get a 50% improvement. And do I need to get to 100%? I would like to, but I probably can't. So I'm happy to sit on about 75%.
For those of us who are seniors, how important is it to have regular scans for bone density?
Okay, so bone density at the moment, you have to be above 65 if you're female and above 70 if you're male, unless you've had a prior fracture, and then you can get it, I believe, once every 2 years. I would strongly recommend that if you have never done a bone density test, to do one, especially if it's covered by the Medicare rebate. If you don't have it, if it's not covered, it costs about $125 on average. It is very useful information for your GP, because what you will find is that in most people, you don't do a bone density test until you fracture. It is never done until someone fractures. Or they go on a steroid medication, or you complain, I might have a little bit of a sharp pain in my back, which means vertebral fracture, red flag. Then you get a bone density or you get a scan. So we're trying to work on creating a document that will change the mindset of the government to make screening not so reactive, but more preventative, more proactive, so that anybody above the age of 60, for example, can walk in and say, I want my bone density test. Hopefully we'll get that through in, I don't know how long it will take, but I'll make sure we keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, just one there. Yeah.
Is it possible to get a copy of your speech at all?
Yep, I'll send it and then we can send it out, no problem.
Okay.
Yep.
And also, you mentioned tinned salmon with bones. I have smoked salmon every day, but why do you say tinned salmon with bones? And also, I'd heard it's good, and I've never heard of this before, it's good to get a heart calcium count.
A heart calcium? Coronary artery calcification score. Okay, so I'll start the first question first, which is the can. Now, but the reason that's there, the canned food's a little bit, you have to be cautious because some of them have very high amount of salt. So if you're gonna get a canned salmon, first pick something that has a low salt content. The reason I pick canned is because it's a lot cheaper than fresh. Now, with that being said, with bone, if we go back to, if we look at Southeast Asia, for example, where I'm from, I'm born in Singapore, and say Malaysia and Thailand, foods that are milk, where we get our dairy and our calcium from, it's like $7 a litre, right? You don't drink milk unless you come from the top part of society. But how is it that these people actually get their calcium intake? And it's actually come from, say, eating fish bones, for example, anchovies. Those are a really rich source of calcium because they've got bone in there. So some of those foods with bone actually do provide some calcium. For example, stock with bone broth can provide some calcium as well. So there is some benefit for eating bones to that extent. Now the second part of the question was related to coronary artery calcification. Yes, it is important to get that looked at, and your GP will generally look at your risk factors. Say, for example, family history, your current cholesterol, your blood sugar levels, and if you tick the boxes on a few things, they'll generally send you for one of those coronary artery calcification scans. They're quite expensive. And they're not something that we kind of just push out because there's also a decent amount of radiation associated with some of those scans. What we are trying to do now is trying to get around that problem in some of the work that we're doing. So for example, when you go in for a bone scan, you can get a scan from the side, right? And what that does from the side is it takes an image of your lateral spine, okay? So this way. And in front of your lateral spine, you have a huge artery called the abdominal aorta. And from that artery, we are actually able to tell how much calcification you have. And we found very strong correlations between that and coronary artery calcification. In fact, a lot of people who present with the calcification here first before it gets there. So what we're trying to do now is we've used AI to, say for example, somebody goes in for a bone density test, so osteoporosis screening, we're able to give them their cardiovascular risk score from that bone density test. And we're trying to get that into mainstream bone density screening because then it helps some people who say, okay, I'm going to go in for bone density, but hey, guess what? You've actually got quite a bit of calcium there. Your bones are fine, but you've got a bit of calcium in your blood vessels. Maybe you should take this to your GP, and then your GP can decide what to do in terms of your coronary artery score as well. So we are trying to bring screening much earlier using different modalities. Coronary artery, there is quite a lot of criteria, and it is quite an expensive test as well to run.
Can you reverse a diagnosis of osteoporosis?
Yes, you can. You can certainly move from osteoporosis to osteopenia, which is kind of like the stage just before, or you can go from osteopenia back into normal. Now, there are many ways to do it, and one way which is people will always say is you can use drugs, right? Pharmacotherapy. Now, drugs are very effective in improving your bone mineral density. Now, I just try and create an image in your head if you can. You've got a bone here, and you've got drugs. What the drugs actually do is, if you just think of your drugs as sticky notes now, all right, sticky notes, and you're taking your sticky notes and you're just pasting them all over the bone. The bone is going to get a little bit stronger, but there's no pattern or there's no organization of how the bone is strengthening. It is essentially like there's a crack. We'll try and fill this bit in, we'll fill that bit in, we'll fill that bit in. Now with exercise, the benefits are more consistent throughout the bone. So the loading, the resistance exercise that I spoke about actually creates a more, a more uniform structure to the bone. So with exercise combined with diet, with medication, all right, in more severe cases, you can definitely bring that back. That is not uncommon. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the medication is definitely beneficial, but when you combine it with exercise and a good balanced diet, you will see far superior benefits. So the medication works, the exercise let's put it this way, if somebody just went on the medication and somebody just did the exercise, the benefits are very, very comparable. In fact, you might see a little bit more with the exercise. But when you put the two together, they don't cancel each other out. They actually increase further. So
you would recommend medication?
I would recommend medication if your doctor thinks that you need it. Right?
So at the minute I'm juggling on that thought.
Yeah, it is. It really depends where you're. So, for example, we use something called a T-score or bone mineral density to determine how severe osteoporosis is. If you sit on the line, that's a conversation. If you sit far past the line, then the decision is quite easy because we need to really reduce the imminent fracture risk. So there's a lot of factors. For example, some people respond with no problems to the medication. Some people don't really like it. They get some side effects. So again, it is something that really requires your GP or your endocrinologist who really understands you and what you want. So my best advice would be when you go and see your GP to not just ask them what should I do, but tell them what you like to do. And if they don't give you advice that fits in with what you would like to do as a patient, what your preference is, then maybe consider, is this the best GP for me? Because their advice will only be as good if you're happy to carry on with it, right? So they'll give you advice and say, but I really want to do this. Is there something that we can do together to meet in the middle, or is this the only option? And in some cases, medication might really be the only option and we have to do it. But there's oftentimes, if you say, I really like to exercise, I really like to do this, could you recommend me, could you refer me to an exercise specialist? Can I combine that with my bone medication and a nutritionist? You probably get the best outcome. So don't be afraid to ask the question and tell your doctors what you like as well. Yeah?
In regards to increasing protein, is it gimmicky or is it beneficial to take something like Uncle Toby's or Carmen's protein-enriched oats or Brown's protein coffee?
It is okay. I wouldn't say it is. I wouldn't recommend it. It comes back down to the sugar content again. So, for example, if somebody is struggling with managing sugar levels, like glucose levels, then the concern for that spike is quite. For example, if you're going for flavored milk, that could be problematic. If it's Uncle Toby's, for example, with a low GI fiber kind of bar, that might be more beneficial. I don't think it's gimmicky. I think it's fine. At the end of the day, we need to get the total amount of protein, but it also comes down to preference. So pick something that you really like. And then if that gives you joy, look at something else that you can change in your diet to try and improve other aspects of your diet.
As we get older, we've got quite a lot of food intolerances. And, you wouldn't believe it, but I've got what my mother's got, so whatever. Now, one of them is trying to get enough dairy in a day, so I've gone to lactose-free. However, it's quite a lot to eat, so 3 serves plus a tablet. So can you also count that cheese as a protein? It's not much, but at least, it's just a protein, isn't it? The cheese and the milk.
One of the easiest ways to kind of figure out how much protein you need is you kind of look at your body weight, right? Jump on the scales, and you just multiply that whatever your body weight is, you need that about 90 to 95% of your body weight in protein a day, in grams. So if for simplicity's sake, if you're 100 kilos, you will need about 90 grams, 94 grams of protein a day. What is quite cool at the moment, but has to be taken with a pinch of salt is you can actually jump on the internet and use some of the AI programs, right? And say, if I need to consume 90 grams of protein a day and I don't like to eat this, where can I get some of those foods? Where can I get my protein from? And it will give you a list of foods. Then you can actually look on those foods that it's recommended when you go to the supermarket on the labels, how much protein you get a serve. And if you have a rough idea for 4 or 5 of your favorite foods, and you know you keep going back to those foods, that's one way that I try and get to my intake. In terms of the tolerances, it is quite tough, and that's why I say the minute it becomes a little bit challenging, that's where sitting down on a one-on-one consult with a nutritionist would really help. And if you get a referral from your GP, you're allowed 5 consults a year covered under Medicare as well. So that can be used across physiotherapy, nutrition, exercise. It's not a lot, we should get more, but you can definitely use one of those for personal consult with a nutritionist or dietitian.
Recipe book that you have, I'm sorry, did you say that we have to contact the hospital to get that?
So the recipe, just the question was regarding the recipe book. There is, if I forward you the recipe book, can you just send out to everybody on the invite list? I think that's fine, we'll send it out, no problem. So it'll be in your emails.
Just a comment really. About 6 months ago, I started having a few minor falls. So I incorporated a exercise program using weights, which is what you recommend, and strength training and sit to stand,
Yep.
things like that. And also made some changes to my diet, incorporating a lot more veggies than what I normally eat. And after 6 months, I've noticed a definite improvement in my health and my well-being as far as balance goes, mobility, and just generally good health. You know, less likely to get sick as well, even during the winter. So I just wanted to comment that this program really does work, because I've been using it myself, doing it myself, and it really does work. So thank you.
I mean, the best thing I can say is it really requires you to look at what the guidelines are and going, okay, I don't think that's achievable, but what can I do to get me as close as possible? What are some of the things that I can maybe sacrifice now to try and get me closer? Because it's not going to happen overnight. It is impossible. My mom will never get 4 serves of dairy a day. It will never happen in my household. So what can I do for mom to try and get her closer there? So some of the things that I've said to my little girl, I've said, when you go to grandma's, ask grandma to prepare this for dinner. Because if my little girl asks for it, grandma will make it. So those are small little things that I try and do to change lifestyle without letting the person who's basically, you got to be a bit strategic. Who's the head of the household in the house? And you get that person to make those changes.
Yes, and I think it's really important to be consistent with your changes.
Yeah.
So you make sure you do them really regularly, like, for instance, the strength training. You know, I'm very consistent with it now, 3 times a week, as well as walking and other things. But yeah, I've really noticed an improvement.
Balance.
That encourages me to do it even more.
The balance, and one thing I forgot to mention really quickly, if I can, is the exercise reduced the risk of falls and fractures. Big tick, right? The type of exercise, the balance and the resistance exercise was important. But one of the key drivers to the work has been doing the exercise in a group. If people did the exercise in a group, not structured, but even if it's like, hey, shall we go down to the lake? You have a small group, shall we go down every Tuesday to the lake to go and do a 5-minute, 20-minute walk, and we'll do some exercises? Those were the people who did it in groups that had the best benefits. Because then people felt, oh, I can't let my partner down today, I have to meet them, I have to do it. So if you can form a small little group of 2 to 3 people, that really, really helps with compliance with programs as well. So that's something I thought that was really quite interesting.
Thank you.
No worries. I hope you enjoyed it. No problem.
Thank you, Mark, and I'm sure we all can't wait to taste that vegetable ice cream. Thank you all for joining us today. The Foundation is really proud to present these community health talks and to highlight the important research that's happening right here in the heart of our city. So if you enjoyed today's talk and would like to find out more about the Foundation and even support the research that we do, or that we fund rather, please visit our website. You've got information on the forms that we've asked you to fill in today, and find out about how you could make a tax-deductible gift. Our next community health talk will be on Wednesday the 17th of September, and it will feature Dr. Donna Jaya Cody, who will speak on hearing loss and dementia and the role of hearing rehabilitation. Please take a brochure from the foyer, and please do complete the feedback survey on your seat, as your input helps us to improve our events. So thank you all once again for joining us today.